See that live. So good morning, everybody. So just a quick CoC meeting. We've got in attendance. Good to see Logan representing. Oh, you know what? I'm getting feedback because I'm hearing it live. I close the window, so it's working. Yay! Good things. So we've got Logan representing Ravenstone. We've got Victor representing Frozen Coast. We've got Doug representing um, Astral Winds, and we have Michelle representing Lupin Moon. Wow, I can get all those names right. And of course, still myself for another 6 months. Um, your CEO or King, whichever name you feel like going by. So we received an incident report uh, of something that happened at Dungeon Con, on Friday night of that event, and the incident surrounds, well, kind of unfortunately there was like two incidents really. They both happened on Friday night and they both involved the same person, and that was Grumbles, also known as Kyler Hyman, if I remember correctly, the real name. And so just a quick breakdown of that. The both exchanges were um, um, unfortunately basically racist and um, trying to make sure I'm following all the elements here without spreading too much. Should I just read the whole thing, guys? What do you think? Should I just read it out and just?
I think reading the letter that was submitted without names is fair enough.
Okay, there's some elements here that will call out some specific things, but we'll just with it. Um, so unfortunately, the first incident was he made very pro-Nazi statements and belittled somebody's race and saying that Nazis didn't do anything wrong by purging them. And he was more German than anything else, and was very proud of the strong stance that they took on it, and said other things, including a greeting that include dropping the N word, um, and then continuing on with anti-gay and trans, and calling them walking mental disorders. And he said this all very straight-faced and serious. Um, Sorry, my screen's blowing up with stuff. I think Hadelin wanted to join us, so let me see if I can add her to the call real quick. And so that was the first exchange. That was the first report. It was also noteworthy that it seemed like he was intoxicated because he had been consuming alcohol, and but that's not really an excuse. And then, but this element's a little bit better. On Saturday, he did apologize to the specific individuals, um, and so they considered the matter more or less closed themselves. But I think this is still something that we need to address for various reasons that we'll kind of go into later in the meeting. And so the second report I got was a conversation that also was rather racist and unfortunate. So after butting into a conversation where somebody mentioned that they were Mexican, he said, "Oh, so that's what's wrong with you?" And they replied, "What?" And so presuming that they did not hear, he continued again. So this is Grumbles. He continued to say, "Oh, that's what's wrong with you. You're Mexican." Um, and the conversation somewhat devolved a little bit from there, but it ended on the note of you just need to go away. We're done with this conversation. And at that point, he said, "Okay, and good night," and walked away. But there was no follow up after that, and so as far as I'm aware, no apology or anything was issued on after that. Victor, you made some great points. I just want to hand it to you if you want to share your thoughts on this because you had some strong ones.
Yeah, so I mean, we did get a precedence of, sending a letter to that individual as a warning statement. In particularly, I think this is a little bit different than what was shared with us, the precedence. This affected multiple people. It represented us in a event that had out not only amp garters, but non-amp garters. I believe that our statement and stance on these kind of comments from an individual needs to be pretty mute. We need to be pretty confident and make a stance here that everybody can hear. This is not acceptable.
And so yeah, definitely this is beyond just a simple thing. He had multiple interactions with multiple groups of people, and you're absolutely right. We were at a public event, and so that's a little bit different too. Just kind of amps up the stakes for us because we're interacting with the public there. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add or talk about? I mean, we kind of had private discussions where we're trying to like open this up and share with everybody what our thoughts were. So if anybody wants to jump in, um,
Yeah, I think I'd like to just add that there's no like essentially people are welcome to have whatever opinions and beliefs they would like to have privately held, right? The issue is when you are engaging in conversations with people that are just incredibly inappropriate. Um, and there's a line, and when you cross it, there's consequences. Um, and and for the organization, like it needs to be a safe place for people, and it needs to be a welcoming place for people. And members, individuals, or groups absolutely should not be targeted or feel that attending any event of the organization is puts them at risk of being targeted by individuals. And so if we have identified individuals who are engaging in that behavior, it is sort of the responsibility of the organization to resolve that situation.
Agreed.
all right, so I think we're all on board. So the thing that we had discussed previously, kind of off the air, was we were looking at a 1 month suspension for grumbles. Does anybody have anything else they want to add, change, or deviate from that at all? No. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a vote on.
Hang on.
Sure.
What about like a suspension from AmCard events? Has that ever been done before?
It has. We had a couple of individuals that, as they were initially received a 6 month suspension, and then they received a suspension for an additional 6 months where they were not allowed to attend overnight events because the issue had occurred during an overnight portion. So that is something that the organization has taken into consideration in the past.
So I don't see anything in particular about this, about these things that would lend itself to targeting specific like overnight events or something like that. The only thing I could see would be maybe saying that he can't have alcohol at these events if that's something that we'd want to tack
If that
on.
was under, if he was under the influence of that, and that's what barred him from keeping himself in check, I mean, that's something we should consider.
Um, yeah, because both reports that I see kind of lended itself towards the notion that he was intoxicated to some degree. So if we wanted to say add on, for the next year, he's not to consume alcohol at any AmpGuard event. I could see the relationship there and support that myself. How
I
do you
would
guys
support
feel
that.
about that?
With that said, would we immediately after contact any autocrats that are going to be servicing booths, make sure to inform them of this decision? If that's
Absolutely, and this is a public meeting too, so everybody's going to be able to see and review this meeting itself.
Yep.
But yeah, we would endeavor to make sure that any autocrat or boozocrat knows that guy's on a blacklist
Banned from the bar.
and from the bar.
That is another consideration whenever we're adding sort of conditions to a suspension. A suspension is really black and white, right? You're here or you're not. That's all there is to it. When
Yep.
we add additional conditions, then there's also an administrative portion of that because it's important, I think, for the organization that when we make a decision we have to ensure that it is abided by. So like there's no empty threats. A call has been made, and then we have a additional responsibility to make sure that that's followed through on. So if, I don't necessarily disagree with the idea that he probably shouldn't be consuming alcohol at our events, but then also like we need to make sure that whatever we do, we know we can follow through on, that we have good communication with autocrats or anyone who would be involved in putting on an event where alcohol may be present.
And that's
Like there are some events where Northreach isn't running the bar, right? And individuals can bring their own alcohol because it's an uncontrolled sort of scenario. And what ability do we have at those types of events to control, police, or monitor that? And then if there's an infraction, what does that mean? What are our steps then? So I think that's important to consider in decisions like that.
Right. It can be kind of a rabbit hole here. Yeah, because I'm thinking Solstice War or, you know, yeah, any of those events. Do you guys want to move forward with trying to explore and come up with the full list of, rules and conditions for the alcohol thing, or do we want to drop that for the moment?
I'm not in favor of it.
You're not.
I don't know that that's going to be needed here in particularly, because our point here is making a statement kind of publicly that we're not allowing this kind of communication. So if he doesn't get it past this point, well, then we'll address it at that point.
Right. That sounds fair.
Yeah.
And so maybe just as a warning, if he sees this video in the future, consider carefully if you drink alcohol. That
For
may
everyone.
not. Yeah, for everybody. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think it's also a fair point that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you were drunk or not. If there was any type of additional substance involved, like you're responsible for your behavior and your actions.
Yep.
That's it, period. So, be aware of that. The other thing I wanted to, I had a question about was, have we had any conversation with Grumbles about this at this point in time? Or is it, the reports are very consistent and very substantiated by many, many people. But I just wasn't sure if we'd reached out to him to just have a conversation with him yet.
I don't have a contact for him, so.
Yeah, we have no direct contact for him. That would be relying on Victor. Did we want to, basically you'd have to attend an AmpGuard event again before that kind of contact could be made. How do you guys want to proceed then? And I've also just got a note from somebody kind of requesting that a 1-month suspension is not fitting for this and wants to push a full indefinite suspension based on a CoC 6 violation effectively. So,
Well,
guys?
on that point, I don't know who that was, obviously, but there were multiple people that came up and also said that they felt that the issue was resolved after having received an apology. I don't know if that should take into effect, a permanent suspension or not, but it's something that should be communicated on air.
Right.
I think one of the benefits of moving with a permanent suspension is that that person can absolutely come back if they've convinced enough people that they're, not going to demonstrate that behavior anymore. And we've seen that, people have had a permanent suspension, they've said, I messed up. I would really like to come back and participate in the organization. I can be a good member. I'm an asset, to the group, and they're here and they are great members. So, it's previously we've sort of moved forward with the not adding a lot of timelines to suspensions. It's been like you're in or you're out. And if you want to come back, just tell us why. And if you're convincing enough, people are fine with that. So, that's been a little bit of precedence there. But there's a lot of precedence AmpGuard wide for having suspensions that are time boxed as well. So.
And I might add, our initial reaction here was to send a personal letter to the individual.
Right, to send an official warning. That was the starting point that we had based on the closest precedent. But as we said before, it wasn't necessarily a 1-for-1 precedent either.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a difference. I don't think we've encountered something quite like this before as a group. So
maybe we should go through one by one and see what our thoughts are as the Council of Crowns as to what extent that we want to move forward.
Yeah. So I'll just start in the top left. So that's Logan for my screen.
Okay, yeah. Are we coming through all right?
Yeah.
All right, great. Um, my first reaction when we first started talking about it was indefinite ban, and then we kind of started at the bottom and we're working our way back up towards that. Right now, I don't necessarily feel strongly in favor of the indefinite ban. If we did do it, I would prefer that we kind of set a time for us to proactively get back in touch with them and not necessarily take it off at that time. But I'd like to see some kind of structure because I think it's easy to kind of shut somebody out that way. And so not a guaranteed like we'll take it off this time, but if we said, okay, in 3 months from now, we'll get in touch with him, discuss it with him, and see if he feels like he's able to address the issues. Other than that, I feel like that number would be reasonable at this time, with the understanding that we're all pretty heavily inclined towards a very long-term ban if a similar issue comes up again, which I know like we pretty much all are. So that's kind of where I am on the amount of punishment right now.
I also just got another message from somebody who's watching, and they were sharing that there may have been additional interactions that were also kind of grossly inappropriate. And so, these are just the ones that were, submitted to me. And, some people may have just let things slide thinking that they were isolated incidents.
Yeah,
And so
I mean, another thing to think while we're on that topic, other people coming forward at this point, there were 100+ non-amp garters there. We were representing every individual member of Northreach was representing the organization. And who knows how many more incidences there was across the board.
So I'm going to give Doug an opportunity to talk. Do you have any thoughts you want to share? Where you are?
I'm not sure about the indefinite ban. Coming from me, I'm probably not the most appropriate. I'm not his level, but I was thinking like a suspension from events and as a whole until he can prove to us he can return. When you make it so he's banned from alcohol, then there's more variables. You got to call autocrats, make sure he's not drinking. You got to set a game plan when he is drinking, which would probably just kick him out of the event. And when you ban alcohol, it gets a little more complicated than just banning him from an event, or events. But I think a definite ban might be too much. I don't know. That's all I had.
My only thought about the events thing and why I'm hesitant to go that route is sure this happened at an event, but every single weekend we're representing ourselves, and so when we have new people or it's that perpetual representation of ourselves and creating an environment that's welcoming and open to everybody, and so that's why I'm like I don't know if I feel that events really is the right thing that we're trying to protect here. It's Northreach and the entire organization all the time, 100%. So that's where I'm at as far as thinking about event-specific things. I'm going to skip you, Victor, because you've shared but I'll come back to you, okay? But I'm going to give Michelle an opportunity to chat here.
I'm not certain about an indefinite ban. I'm not sure 1 month is long enough, but I think indefinite might be a little much. I'd like, if we did go with that, I said that since we don't have like the Facebook way to contact for him to be in contact with everybody else, that we do set a time limit when we check in with him and see if he wants to try to make amends and come back or not.
Shelby, did you have anything you wanted to chime in at this point?
Yeah, again, I'm not part of this deciding body. I'm just here as a sort of advisory capacity. So
you're
just
here,
so that's clear to everybody. I think it's worth, each person sort of considering, there's been this idea that, we should maybe touch base with him if we did an indefinite ban, to see if he wanted to come back. And really, I think the question we should probably be asking ourselves is, do we want an individual who's demonstrated this consistent behavior at an event to be part of the organization? And is it our job to see if he wants to come back, right? Like, I think it's really acceptable to say, hey, this is on you. If this is something that's important to you, prove to us that you can be better. And I think that's an important distinction from my perspective, is the onus is on that individual who would demonstrated the unacceptable behaviors. Show the organization as a whole that you're not a risk to our other members, that you're not a risk to our other associations, and we'll welcome you back, absolutely. But it's not on the organization to reach out to an individual who has demonstrated inappropriate behaviors and activities to say, do you want to come back? We want everybody to be involved. We want everybody to be involved in a responsible and respectful manner. And if you can't do that, you fix your stuff, and then we'll bring you back.
All right, Victor, give you the soapbox again.
I think I've pretty much said everything that I really want to say. I don't fully support a indefinite ban, but I'm not against it. I think the biggest thing that we need to do as an organization here is just make the statement that these kinds of actions are not acceptable in our group. I mean, for me, it can be a 1-month ban, it could be a 6-month ban, it could be a year-long ban. We need to show our members that we are taking some kind of action other than a personal letter.
Right.
So that was my biggest point.
Okay. How do you guys feel about extending it from a 1 month to a 1 year? Is that a nice middle ground between indefinite and, not being too lenient?
Honestly, I like indefinite more than I like a year because I feel like it's an arbitrary number. And if we're going to get into a really lengthy punishment, it shouldn't be about punishment and also protection of our members. I mean, that's the other thing that a suspension is supposed to do, right? I feel like, saying, okay, it's been 1 year, like you're good to go is just kind of like, it won't necessarily reflect the realities. So if we're talking a year, I'd rather see indefinite until we're given a reason to say, okay.
Okay. I heard a lot of people say that they didn't feel comfortable with the indefinite ban. That's why I was trying to come up with something a little different. So, how do you guys want to do this? Do you guys want to vote on? Well, it sounds like we're doing something. So, how about I go around and we'll go with either 1 month or indefinite, and we will see where we stand there. Does that sound like a good idea?
Before we vote, I feel like I should say something about the player himself.
Sure.
Because I don't want to come on this video, have him watch it later, and think that I was being, a hard butt. Grumbles hasn't ever shown any kind of action like this before in my presence. And I'm not speaking for his thoughts or his beliefs or concerns. I'm just saying the precedence of his actions hasn't been like this before. With that said, obviously this is a pretty serious matter in my opinion, because I was the one that suggested it. But I think we, as a group, also need to be informed. The audience needs to be informed that he's not necessarily a bad individual, but that he made a bad choice.
Well, it sounds like a series of them throughout the night, but yeah.
Yeah. So that's all I had to say.
Okay. So I think at the moment the plan is going to be, I'll ask each of you whether you want to do a 1 month or an indefinite, and we'll see where we are with that. And so, Logan, month or indefinite?
Indefinite.
All right. Victor?
If between the two, indefinite.
Okay. Doug?
Heidi Land changed my opinion. Indefinite.
Okay. Michelle?
Advisory board.
Indefinite.
Okay. Sounds like we have consensus then. So we'll do an indefinite ban. But and so as we discussed previously, since we don't like, I don't have a workable way to reach him. Victor will do the communication on our behalf. And I think that stressing the his options at this point, and I think I've done that for pretty much everybody that I've communicated any kind of ban or suspension towards. What are the next steps if they want to continue participating? And so I'll make sure that you're familiar with those, so that you can share those with him if you feel uncomfortable with any of the steps.
No, I don't.
You don't? Okay. Awesome. So
If I could just make a suggestion,
yeah.
it would be good for the organization to draft a letter as his official notice.
Oh yes.
And for that,
yeah.
So that we can give him like something consistent, or from the organization that this is the action, these are the reasons, these are your next steps and whatnot.
Okay. Yeah. I've got from previous ones. Unfortunately, this is not something I'm unfamiliar with at this point. All right. That was the main point of business for today. So thank you guys. Unless there's anything else we need to bring up and discuss right now. No. All right. So we'll all get together and see each other's faces again on the 21st. All right. And I'll get you that info hopefully sometime today, if not tomorrow morning, Victor, so you're ready to go. So, all right, guys, thank you, and I'll see some of you in a couple hours. All right.
Thank you.
Later.
Thanks. Bye.